There's a village where spitting into the air makes a sound, a faint crackle, almost like a whisper, because the saliva freezes solid before it hits the ground. Locals have a name for it, the whisper of stars. It sounds like folklore. It isn't. Welcome to a place where the human body itself starts to fight for survival the moment you step outside. And yet, against every instinct that says no one should live here, around 500 people call it home. This is the story of Oymyakon, a remote settlement buried deep in the Siberian wilderness, and the strange, brutal, and oddly beautiful way its people have learned to survive temperatures that would kill most of us in minutes. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what it takes to exist in the coldest permanently inhabited place on the planet, and why, despite everything, the people there have no intention of leaving. Oymyakon sits in the Sakha Republic, also known as Yakutia, a vast region of eastern Russia so enormous it could swallow most of Western Europe and still have room to spare. The village itself is tucked into a valley along the Indigirka River, hundreds of miles from the nearest city, connected to the outside world by a single road that locals grimly call the Road of Bones, a nickname born from its dark history as a route built partly with gulag prison labor during the Soviet era. Geography is the real villain here. Oymyakon sits in a bowl-shaped valley surrounded by mountains, and that shape becomes a trap. Cold, dense air sinks down from the surrounding peaks and pools at the bottom, unable to escape. There's no ocean nearby to soften the extremes, no wind to stir things up, and no coastal moisture to hold heat in the way it does in milder climates. The result is a phenomenon scientists call a cold air pool, and it turns this one valley into something close to a natural freezer, sealed shut through the long Siberian winter. To make matters more extreme, this region also experiences one of the widest annual temperature swings found anywhere on the planet. Summers in Oymyakon can actually climb above 30 degrees Celsius, close to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, for a brief stretch of the year. That means the same valley that plunges toward -60 in January can feel almost tropical by July, a temperature range spanning nearly 100 degrees Celsius across the seasons, which is almost impossible to picture for anyone who hasn't experienced it firsthand. Here's where the story gets interesting. In the winter of 1933, a weather station in Oymyakon recorded a -67.7 degrees Celsius. That's roughly -90 degrees Fahrenheit. Some residents and researchers point to an earlier unofficial reading from 1924 that may have dipped even lower. But because it wasn't measured with certified instruments, meteorologists treat it as folklore rather than fact. What we do know for certain is that Oymyakon's officially recorded low remains one of the coldest temperatures ever documented outside of Antarctica. And that comparison matters, because you might be thinking, Antarctica is colder than that. You'd be right. Russia's Vostok station in Antarctica once recorded a staggering -89 degrees Celsius, colder than anything Siberia has ever produced. But here's the twist. Nobody lives at Vostok station permanently. It's a research outpost, staffed by scientists who rotate in and out for months at a time before heading home. Oymyakon is different. People aren't just visiting. They're raising families, going to school, running shops, and burying their dead in ground so frozen it has to be thawed with fire before a grave can even be dug. That distinction, permanent life versus temporary science, is exactly why Oymyakon, not Antarctica, holds the title of the coldest inhabited place on Earth. So how do you actually live somewhere like this? The answer starts with the smallest, strangest details of daily life. In Oymyakon, cars are never truly turned off during the winter months. Engines run around the clock, sometimes for days, because if the oil freezes solid, the vehicle may never start again. Garages here often come equipped with heaters just to keep engines viable overnight. Even indoor plumbing struggles. Many homes still rely on outdoor toilets, since running water pipes risk freezing and bursting underground. Technology fares even worse. Ink freezes inside pens, rendering them useless outdoors. Smartphone batteries drain in minutes, and screens can crack from the cold. Eyeglasses fog and then freeze solid to a person's face if left on too long. And perhaps most strikingly, breath itself becomes a hazard. Moisture from exhaling can freeze eyelashes shut within moments of stepping outside. But just when you start to picture Oymyakon as a lifeless, frozen wasteland, the reality flips. This region has been inhabited for centuries, long before modern heating or insulated clothing existed. The Ivan and Yakut peoples, indigenous to this part of Siberia, built entire cultures around reindeer herding, fishing, and hunting in conditions that seem almost designed to be uninhabitable. Reindeer aren't just transportation here, they're food, clothing, and shelter material, all fused together into one animal perfectly adapted to extremes Arctic. Even the village's name carries a clue to how humans first survived here. Oymyakon is believed to derive from a Yakut word referring to a body of water that doesn't freeze, pointing to a nearby thermal spring that even in the harshest winters resisted the deep freeze. That unfrozen water is likely the very reason nomadic herders chose this valley as a seasonal stopping point centuries ago, watering their reindeer here before eventually settling permanently during the Soviet era, when authorities pushed for fixed settlements across the region. Which brings us to a deeper mystery. If the cold is this extreme, how does anything survive outdoors at all? Plants, animals, anyone? The answer lies in adaptation stacked upon adaptation, refined over generations. Local horses, a hardy breed known as the Yakutian horse, grow thick double coats and can dig through snow with their hooves to reach frozen grass underneath, a behavior scientists call cratering. These horses are so well adapted to extreme cold that they're able to withstand winters most other breeds simply couldn't endure, making them essential not just for transportation, but for the region's food and dairy traditions as well. Fish in the region's rivers survive by slowing their metabolism to a near standstill during the coldest months. And humans in Oymyakon dress not in single heavy coats, but in multiple thin layers, often finished with fur, since fur traps warm air far more efficiently than synthetic materials at these extremes. Reindeer hide boots in particular remain a preferred choice because modern synthetic footwear can actually become brittle and crack in this level of cold. Food culture adapted too, in ways that might surprise you. Grocery shopping in Oymyakon during winter often means buying meat and fish that are already frozen solid, sold standing upright in outdoor markets like strange frozen sculptures, since there's no need for freezers when the entire outdoors functions as one. Local dishes lean heavily on stroganina, thin shavings of raw, frozen fish eaten straight from the freezer air, a practice that long predates refrigeration technology entirely. Now, here's where the story reaches its most surprising turn. You'd expect a place this cold to feel like a ghost town, isolated and grim. Instead, community life in Oymyakon remains remarkably active. Children still attend school, though with an important safety rule. Classes are only canceled once temperatures drop low enough to pose a genuine risk of frostbite within minutes, a threshold set by local authorities and adjusted based on age, since younger children are more vulnerable to cold injury. Even by Oymyakon standards, the trigger point for closing school sits at an almost unbelievable extreme, illustrating just how normalized deep cold has become in daily life here. And that normalization is really the heart of this story. What would be a life-threatening emergency almost anywhere else on Earth is, for the people of Oymyakon, simply Tuesday. Farmers still tend livestock, reindeer herders still move their animals across frozen terrain, families still gather for meals, celebrate holidays, and raise children who grow up believing that -40 is just an ordinary winter day, because in Yakutia, -40 happens to be the one temperature where Celsius and Fahrenheit scales actually meet at the same number, a small, strange coincidence locals sometimes joke about, which leads to the biggest reveal of all, the answer to the question that should be sitting in your mind by now. Why would anyone choose to stay? The truth is, most residents of Oymyakon don't see themselves as trapped by the cold. They see themselves as shaped by it. Generations of adaptation have turned an environment that seems designed to reject human life into a functioning, deeply rooted community, complete with its own traditions, its own humor about the cold, and its own quiet pride in simply enduring where so few others could. Tourism has even begun trickling in, with travelers seeking out the extreme cold as a bucket list experience, drawn by the same disbelief you probably felt when this video began. Local guides now lead cold weather expeditions, offering visitors a first-hand taste, however brief, of what daily life here actually demands. Climate change is now entering this story too, and scientists are watching the region closely, since warming trends in the Arctic and subarctic are occurring faster than the global average. Some researchers have raised the possibility that extreme cold records like Oymyakon's could become rarer over time, though predicting exactly how a single valley's unique geography will respond to broader climate shifts is far from straightforward. What that means for Oymyakon's long-term climate identity remains uncertain, and researchers continue monitoring the data rather than drawing premature conclusions. There's also a quieter story unfolding here, one about population. Like many remote settlements across Siberia, Oymyakon has seen its population population gradually shrank over recent decades as younger residents moved toward larger cities in search of work and opportunity. The families who remain tend to be those with the deepest roots in the region: herders, hunters, and workers tied to traditions that don't easily transplant elsewhere. It raises a quiet question about the future of places like this. Not whether the cold will ever loosen its grip, but whether the communities built to withstand it will still be there to meet it. For now, though, Oymyakon remains what it has been for generations: a small, stubborn pocket of human life planted directly in the path of the coldest air on Earth. Not because it's easy, not because it's comfortable, but because somewhere along the way, the people who live there stopped seeing the cold as an enemy to escape and started seeing it as simply where they belong. Perhaps that's the real lesson hiding inside this frozen valley: that human beings don't just survive the harshest corners of this planet. Given enough time, we learn to call them home.